The member from Timiston Cochrane.
Thank you, Speaker. It's always a pleasure to rise in the House and speak on behalf of the residents of Timiston Cochrane and on behalf of the official opposition, and in response to the budget motion. And as I was sitting listening to Minister Vanthof give his virtual road tour of Southern Ontario, many of the places, actually every town that he mentioned, I've been to. And my family comes from Southern Ontario, and specifically St. Thomas, regarding the proposed battery plant from Volkswagen. And the NDP, we helped fast-track that bill through the legislature. We understand. We care about jobs. We understand. But as I was listening to the virtual tour and I listened intently, I drove home the next day, thinking about the virtual road tour and thinking, you know what, there's not very many people probably who know my neck of the woods, my part of the province. And the first thing that I noticed driving home, at the work yard for the contractor who takes care of Highway 11 in the Temagami area, the flags were flying at half-mast. And they were flying at half-mast in respect to the snowplow operator who'd lost his life a few days before in northwestern Ontario. And that's not an uncommon occurrence for the people who take care of our roads. I believe there was, the last time I talked to our local contractor, 260 or 270 major accidents with snow cleaning equipment, not counting the ones since that meeting. So that's what happens on some of the roads in the province. But I listened very intently, and talking about the Ring of Fire, and the Ring of Fire has got a few other problems because the government doesn't appear to be asking for free, prior informed consent from all the First Nations. Nope. But that's an issue for another day. But we were talking to the Road Builders Association, and something the government might not have thought about is our road infrastructure. The roads that we have now that you have to get to the Ring of Fire, 11 and 17, they're not good enough to actually get the equipment to build the road to the Ring of Fire, And that is a serious concern. And you may not believe this, Madam Speaker, but Highway 11, once you get to Barrie, and Highway 11 and 400, they split. And Highway 11 is still a 4-lane highway. And so is 400. But at some point, that both stops. And it stops for Highway 11 in North Bay. So you're thinking everything's fine. And then you crest Tebow Hill. And the world changes because it's 2-lane. It's basically a Southern Ontario country road. It's paved, it's got narrow shoulders, and that's the Trans-Canada Highway. That's the highway that you think is going to help you get to the Ring of Fire. Nope. That is the highway that since January, since January to March 29th, has had major closures 11 times. And not closures for 5 minutes, but hours and hours. And that's actually not accurate because it was closed again yesterday. Wow. Let's all go to the Ring of Fire. How? How are you going to get to the Ring of Fire when we don't have the infrastructure to actually get transit, to get goods across the country now? It's a shame in Ontario that the Trans-Canada Highway that goes through Northern Ontario is a 2-lane country road. Country highway. That's what it is. That's what it is. The government can talk about, we have pushed very hard, and they've moved the average up to for cleaning from 16 hours after a major snowstorm or after a snow event to 12. Give credit where credit's due. They moved a little bit because we've been pushing them like crazy for years. And now, to Minister Mulroney's credit, they are going to institute a 2+1 pilot project, which is basically extended passing lanes and a barrier on the passing lane so you can't cut into the passing lane. It's a pilot project on 14 or 15 kilometers. That highway is thousands of kilometers. And a pilot project of 14 or 15 is not going to get you to the Ring of Fire. You need to think about that right away. You need to think about that right away. So, Northern Ontario, we have, as does the rest of the province, lots of jobs. We have more jobs than we have people. And we have good jobs. So I was talking to one of our major employers in my riding, and a mine mechanic in Kirkland Lake can make $300,000 a year. And they have a hard time finding people. Why? Why? Because we don't have a lot of services, social services in Northern Ontario. Things that the member from Waterloo was talking about that they're worried about losing, that they are losing in Northern Ontario. We never had them, or we lost them already. We have local hospitals, and they do what they can. But if you need to see a specialist, you need to come to the hospitals down here. And we have a thing called the Northern Travel Grant, and that travel subsidy hasn't changed in years and years and years and years. So equal access in healthcare for Northerners has been gone a long time ago. And this budget completely and totally ignores that. This budget talked a lot about the riches of Northern Ontario, about the Ring of Fire, and there's many other riches in Northern Ontario. But government after government, and this one probably more than any, has ignored the social needs of what people in the North need to provide the riches to the rest of the province. The biggest gold mine, I believe, in North America, Detour Gold, is in the district of Cochrane. Right next to my riding, actually. The town of Cochrane's in my riding. The mine's in the next riding. It's a very big producer of gold. And we are soon going to have a big producer of nickel in that area, Canada Nickel. Timmins is a mining, the minister will know that minister of mines, how big mining is in Timmins. There's so much money coming out of the north. You know something else about the north, about the district of Cochrane, where Timmins and Cochrane and Detour Gold, what they are? The rate of homelessness in the district of Cochrane, covered by the Cochrane Social Services Board, per 1,000 people, is the highest in the province. The highest in the province. It's minus 40 lots of times where I live. And homelessness now is it's a tragic issue. I'm not discounting it anywhere else. But very few people think about that it's the highest, where it's the coldest, and where the riches come from. But for some reason, the services don't come back. It's great to take. And we have experienced that in the north for as long as we've been there. Cobalt, the first silver boom. Kirkland, the first gold boom. Timmins, boom. Cobalt, where the original stock exchange for Ontario, the first one was in cobalt. But all the money eventually came to Toronto. Eventually came to the south. And now we hear this government saying, oh, trust us, the Ring of Fire, you, especially Indigenous people, are going to benefit incredibly from the Ring of Fire. Just trust us. It's never happened before. They have trusted before when they signed treaties. It never happened. It's not going to happen this time either. They know that. Unless they stand up for themselves, they know that. The Finance Committee traveled through Northern Ontario. It stopped in Timmins. It stopped in Sudbury. And healthcare, primary healthcare specifically, is a tough issue in Northern Ontario. And I'd like to read a quote from someone who presented at the Finance Committee in Sudbury. And she's actually the CEO, the president and CEO, Miss Sue Lebeau, the president and CEO of West Nipissing General Hospital. And she was also, before that, the CEO and president of the Red Lake Margaret Couchenour Memorial Hospital. She's got a lot of experience in running hospitals in Northern Ontario. And I'm going to read directly from her statement. She talks about her experiences at the hospital, and in quotes, but the most harrowing experience that I had and that our team had during my time there was a closure of our emergency department due to lack of staffing. It was a scary time. It was a short time, but it was something that we would not want to relive. And it's something that my colleagues and myself in the North have struggled to maintain core services and to be able to manage and keep serving our communities. But she also identified one of the major problems that this government is ignoring. Actually, that this government is perpetuating with Bill 124. Not ignoring, they're perpetuating it. So, and again, this is directly from her. In terms of agency nursing, to paint the picture locally, our hospital, West Nipissing, has expended $1.5 million for agency nursing over the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. Wow. That represents about 10% of our budget for 10 nurses, $150,000 per nurse for 3 quarters of the year. Those costs, of course, are not budgeted. Agency nursing has become a necessity in Northern Ontario. However, it is not a long-term solution. Our loyal local nurses are impacted by these agency nurses. They're demoralized by this. And the government is not standing idly by while this is happening. They are perpetuating it with Bill 124. They're forcing healthcare staff out of their chosen profession or out of their profession working for the public side, and they're forcing them to go work for the agencies, and the same nurses come back into that hospital for twice the cost. And the government, the Minister of Finance says, we're putting more money than ever into healthcare. That could very well be. But the money, a lot of that money is going to the private sector who are running those agencies and siphoning money out for profit. Why don't you just pay the nurses what they're worth and cut out the agencies? Why? How can you pretend to be careful with the province's finances when you don't understand that basic principle? Or actually, you do understand that basic principle, you're perpetuating it. You're perpetuating it. It's incredibly tough to sit here and stand here and see that there are solutions. We can't provide solutions for everything, but there are solutions staring you in the face. And yes, some of them you are going to have to admit that you made mistakes. Bill 124 seemed like an easy solution at the time. Hold public servants to 1%, and you will save costs. You just didn't realize that public servants, especially in those in healthcare, are going to be able to move with their feet. When you're not paying them with respect, you talk about respect, but when you're not paying them with respect, they're going to move with their feet. And you still need them, then you have to hire them back through private agencies at more cost. It's killing the system. It's killing the system. I'm going to go back a little bit to my road tour, because I want people to come to Northern Ontario. We need people. It is a great place to live. We have our challenges, and that's what we're trying to bring to people's attention, but it's a great place to live. If you decide to come, I'm just going to give you a couple pointers. Okay? If you like stopping at en routes, and you like, because you can get whatever food you want, and the market, and you can load up for the trip. Okay? Past Barrie, there are none. Ontario stops for en route at Barrie. Nothing. Crest Thibault Hill, and your 4 lanes stop. There are none. There's also very few places we have a lot of transports on Highway 11. It's the Trans-Canada Highway. It is where the goods cross from one end of Canada to the other. There's very few places for those transports to stop. There's very few parking spots for transports. That's a big problem because they have no place to rest. And we have lots of accidents with transports and lots of things. You wonder how it got there. With a transport, you just can't pull off the shoulder on Highway 11 because you're not coming back on. Because the shoulders are narrow and you're stuck. So be prepared. When the highway's closed, if you crest Thibault Hill, and the Thibault Hill, there's a big sign that says the highway might be closed, but if it's closed right after you crest that sign, you might be on the highway for hours in a line. And there are no emergency services going to come find you. Maybe volunteers. Volunteers from Temagami do this a lot. So you better bring a blanket, you better bring chocolate bars, and you better have a full tank of gas when you cross Thibault Hill. That's Northern Ontario. And I am not trying to disparage it. I love Northern Ontario. I'm never going to live anywhere else. And my last point I'd like to make, and I'd like to give a shout out. A shout out to a group. So this government's talking a lot about agriculture in Northern Ontario. I'm a farmer, farmed in Northern Ontario my whole life. And Northern Ontario is a great place to farm. It is a great place to farm. And if you want to know something about farming in Northern Ontario, you've got an incredible chance to do it. April 13th and 14th at the Earlton Farm Show. So the Earlton Farm Show is an exposition of agricultural services available in our area. And you will talk to people who actually make a living farming in our area, and a good living. There are very good farmers from in the Little Clay Belt around Temiskaming and farther north in the Greater Clay Belt. There's a lot of expertise there. But if you're thinking about farming in Northern Ontario or seeing what Northern Ontario's farming is like in Northern Ontario, please come to the farm show. The volunteers that put that together put a lot of effort into it. This is the first one in 3 years because of COVID. I'm going to be there, but everyone who is anything to do with agriculture in Northern Ontario is going to be there. I've even been warned that the Minister of Agriculture might even be there, and we will welcome her with open arms. And but please, we have our problems in Northern Ontario. The government has to recognize them and address them so that we can actually truly fill our place in the province. But to talk, and I'm going to close, to talk about the Ring of Fire, when your connection to the Ring of Fire is Highway 11 and 17, 2-lane roads, you're dreaming. You're dreaming. They can barely handle the traffic on them now. They can't. Because their accident stats, people talk about about Ontario having the best roads in North America. They're certainly not 11 and 17. And those are the roads to the Ring of Fire. Those are the roads that connect Southern Ontario to the Ring of Fire. And those roads, you need to pay as much attention to them as what you're paying to the rest of the province. And for that, I'd like to thank you for your time, Speaker.